There are places on this earth where the land itself seems to carry a weight that no map can capture. We tend to think of geography as something physical: dirt, rock, sand, and water. We draw borders on paper, we name cities, and we assume that the ground beneath our feet is just ground, silent, indifferent, dead. But ask anyone who has spent time in the oldest parts of the world, in the places where history is measured not in centuries but in millennia, and they will tell you differently. They will tell you that there are places where the silence has a texture to it. Places where the history isn't just written in books but is soaked into the soil layer upon layer of blood, conquest, prayer, and death, stretching back 5,000 years. Iraq is one of those places. Before it was a war zone for modern armies, it was Babylon, it was Sumer. It was Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. It is where humanity first learned to write, first learned to build cities, and first learned to wage organized war. The beliefs of the people who have lived there for thousands of years are deeply woven into the fabric of daily life. To them, the desert is not empty, it is inhabited. And when American soldiers arrived in the early 2000s, they brought with them the most advanced technology in human history. They had thermal imaging that could see heat signatures from a mile away. They had satellite communications that could talk to space. They carried assumptions built on rationality, on evidence, on things that can be measured and explained. For most of them, those assumptions held true. The enemy was physical. The danger was ballistics and explosives. But for a select few, the technology failed. The rationality broke down and the assumptions shattered. This channel exists because those people reached out. Over the years, we have received hundreds of messages from service members, current and former, who wanted to share what happened to them during their deployments. Most of them took years before they were ready to talk about it. Some of them still won't use their real names. A few of them have never told anyone else in their lives what they experienced, and they came here, to this space, because they felt it was the only place where no one would laugh at them. What you are about to hear are accounts from men and women who served in the sandbox. These are not stories of combat. They are not stories of heroism under fire. They are stories of the things that happen when the shooting stops and the watching begins. Our first account comes from a soldier who asked us to refer to him simply as Marcus. He served with an infantry unit stationed in northern Iraq near the Diyala province sometime in the mid-2000s. To understand Marcus's story, you have to understand the specific kind of boredom that comes with a deployment. Movies show war as non-stop action, but the reality is often 1% sheer terror and 99% aggressive, mind-numbing boredom. Marcus's unit was tasked with maintaining a perimeter around a remote infrastructure site. The area was surrounded by old farmland fields that had been abandoned months earlier when the local population fled the fighting. It was a ghost town in the literal sense. The mud brick houses were empty, their windows like hollow eyes staring out at the patrols. The irrigation canals were dry, filled with cracked earth and trash. The only things moving out there were stray dogs in the wind, which carried the smell of burning trash and ancient dust. It was 0200 hours, 2 in the morning, the graveyard shift. Marcus was positioned at an observation point on the eastern edge of the perimeter. He described the night as suffocatingly clear. In the desert, without the light pollution of the modern world, the stars don't just twinkle, they glare. The visibility was perfect, stretching for miles into the obsidian darkness. He was equipped with a PVS-14 monocular standard issue night vision. If you've never used one, it's not like the movies. It destroys your depth perception. The world becomes a flat, green wash of grain and shadows. You have to constantly refocus the lens to see clearly, twisting the front objective as you scan from near to far. Marcus was scanning his sector, left to right, right to left. The landscape was flat, stretching out into the abyss, broken only by a sparse cluster of date palm trees about 200 meters out. He scanned past the trees, his eyes glazing over from the monochrome fatigue. Then he stopped. His brain registered an anomaly, a shape that didn't fit the jagged organic geometry of nature. He swung his optic back to the tree line, fighting the lag of the image intensifier. There was a figure. It was standing just outside the cover of the palms, exposed in the open ground. At first, Marcus's training kicked in. His mind immediately categorized the shape: insurgent, spotter, digger. He assumed it was a man planting an eye under the cover of darkness. He immediately tightened his grip on his M4 carbine, flicked the safety off with a metallic click that sounded like a gunshot in the silence of the tower, and leaned into his weapon sight. His heart rate spiked, the adrenaline dump that every soldier knows. His breathing became shallow, heavy in his chest. But as the seconds ticked by, the adrenaline began to curdle into confusion. The figure wasn't moving, it wasn't crouching, it wasn't digging, it wasn't scanning the horizon. It was standing perfectly, unnaturally upright, arms at its sides, facing directly toward Marcus's tower. Marcus adjusted the focus ring on his night vision, trying to sharpen the image through the electronic noise. The figure was about 6 feet tall, humanoid, but the details were wrong. Through the thermal optics, a human being glows white or black depending on the polarity settings. They radiate heat. Life is heat. Marcus didn't have thermals that night. He only had image intensification. He couldn't tell if it was warm. He could only tell it was there. He keyed his radio, whispering to keep his voice from carrying over the acoustically perfect desert floor. "TOC, this is Post 1. I have a visual on a single PAX, stationary 200 meters east, near the palm grove." The radio crackled back, the voice of the sergeant of the guard sounding tinny and bored. "Post 1, copy. Monitor. Do they have a weapon?" Marcus squinted, his eye watering from the strain. "Negative on weapon visible. Subject is just standing there." Marcus watched for 5 minutes. Do you know how long 5 minutes is when you are staring at a potential threat in the dark? It feels like a lifetime. He told us later that animals move. People move. Even when you try to stand still, you shift your weight, you scratch your nose, you look around. This thing was like a statue dropped in the middle of the desert. A feeling of dread began to crawl up Marcus's spine. It wasn't a tactical fear anymore. It wasn't the fear of getting shot. It was a primal fear. The feeling of being watched by a predator that you can't understand. He blinked. His eye was drying out from staring through the optic. He closed his eye for a fraction of a second, just a blink, to reset his vision. When he opened his eye, the green field was empty. The figure hadn't run away. There was no dust cloud kicking up from fleeing boots. There was no motion blur. It was simply deleted from reality. Scanned right. Nothing. Just the empty, mocking silence of the Iraq night. A quick reaction force was sent out to sweep the area. They checked the ground where the figure had stood with high-powered floodlights. The dust there was moon dust fine, powder like sand that captures every detail. If a beetle walked across it, it left a trail. The soldiers found nothing. No boot prints, no sandal marks. The earth was undisturbed, as if nothing had stood there for 1,000 years. Marcus was ridiculed by his squad the next morning. They called him crazy. They said he saw a shadow of a tree. But Marcus knows trees don't disappear, and he knows that trees don't stare back. Our second account moves us from the open, expansive desert to the claustrophobic interior of a forward operating base in the south. This story comes from a medic named Sarah. If you talk to medical personnel in the military, they have a different relationship with death than the infantry. For the infantry, death is sudden, violent, and loud. For medics, death is a process. It smells like iron, antiseptic, and burning diesel. It sticks to your clothes. Sarah was working a rotation that had lasted nearly 18 hours. The base had taken casualties earlier that day from a mortar attack, and the trauma bay had been a slaughterhouse. By the 300 hours, the chaos had subsided. The patients were stabilized or evacuated. The cleaning was done. Sarah was physically and emotionally hollowed out, vibrating with exhaustion. She found a quiet supply room where the medics would take turns napping. It was a small concrete bunker, really. No windows, just a heavy steel door and a few cots lined up against the wall. She didn't even take her boots off. She lay down, pulled a Wubia poncho liner over her face to block out the light creeping under the door, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. But sleep in a combat zone is never truly deep. Part of your brain stays awake, listening for the siren, for the mortar impact, for the shout. Sarah woke up abruptly. There was no noise, no alarm. She just opened her eyes and felt the air in the room change. It felt charged, like the static electricity before a thunderstorm, making the hair on her arms stand up. She pulled the blanket down slowly. Standing at the foot of her cot was a woman. Sarah's brain tried to categorize the threat, cycling through possibilities. Intruder, local national, lost patient. The woman was dressed in a full black abaya, the traditional robe worn by Iraqi women. Only her face and hands were visible. But it was how she looked that froze Sarah's blood. She wasn't transparent. She wasn't glowing like a movie ghost. She looked solid, heavy, real, but the room was locked. This was a secure military base inside a secure perimeter. There was no way a local civilian woman could just walk into the sleeping quarters of a medical bay without being stopped by 3 layers of security. Sarah tried to sit up, but her body wouldn't obey. She was locked in paralysis, her limbs heavy as lead. But she could move her eyes. She could feel the rough fabric of the cot under her fingers. The woman in black wasn't looking around. She was staring directly at Sarah. Her expression wasn't angry, it wasn't menacing. Sarah described it as infinite grief. It was the face of a mother who had lost everything, a sorrow so deep it felt like it was radiating heat. They locked eyes for what felt like a minute. The only sound in the room was the thrumming of the diesel generator outside, vibrating through the concrete floor. Then, the woman slowly raised a hand, not to attack, but as if to reach out, a gesture of pleading. Sarah finally found her voice. She gasped, a sharp intake of breath that broke the spell. At that sound, the woman turned. She didn't walk toward the door. She turned toward the solid concrete wall of the bunker, and she stepped through it, not like a ghost passing through fog, but as if the wall simply wasn't there for her. She merged with the concrete and was gone. Sarah scrambled off the cot, grabbing her mine pistol from the holster on her belt. She checked the door, locked, bolted from the inside. She searched the room, throwing boxes aside, empty. She sat on the edge of that cot until sunrise, shaking, weapon in hand, unable to close her eyes again. She told us later that she has seen people die. She has seen bodies torn apart. She can handle blood. But the sadness in that room, it felt heavier than any death she saw on the operating table. It felt like the grief of the land itself was manifesting in front of her. Our final account comes from the most isolated setting of all, a vehicle checkpoint on a lonely stretch of highway in the western desert. Daniel was a sentry. His job was simple: stand by the road, stop cars, check IDs, look for contraband. But at night, on these remote roads, there are no cars. There is just you, your partner, and the desert. The isolation out there is psychological torture. Your mind starts to crave stimulus. You start to see patterns in the stars. You start to hear things in the wind. But what Daniel heard wasn't the wind. It was 03:30 hours, the dead hour. Daniel was standing near the HESCO barriers, those big wire cages filled with dirt that form the walls of the checkpoint. His partner was smoking a cigarette a few feet away, the cherry of the tobacco glowing in the dark. It was dead silent. And then came the sound. Crunch, a very loud, distinct footstep on gravel. Daniel froze. Crunch. There it was again. Daniel spun around, raising his rifle to the high ready. The sound came from the dark side of the checkpoint, the open desert, where no one was allowed to be. Crunch, crunch. It was the unmistakable sound of heavy military boots walking on loose gravel. Rhythmic, heavy, deliberate. Halt! Identify! Daniel shouted, his voice cracking slightly. He flipped on his weapon light. A beam of 500 lumens cut through the darkness like a lightsaber. It illuminated nothing. Just rocks, sand, empty desert stretching out to the horizon. But the sound didn't stop. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Daniel watched the empty ground where the sound was coming from. The gravel wasn't moving. There were no footprints appearing in the dust, but the sound was walking right past him. It was walking in a wide arc, circling the checkpoint. The cigarette had fallen from his partner's mouth, sparks scattering on the ground. His face was pale white, his eyes wide with terror. "Do you hear that?" Daniel whispered, praying the answer was no. His partner nodded, too terrified to speak. They stood back to back, weapons raised, tracking an invisible intruder with their rifles. The footsteps circled them completely, a full 360 degrees. It sounded like a giant was patrolling them, walking a perfect circle around their position, testing the perimeter. Rabavan Bayawan quiet noun cans. It sounded, and then, as the invisible walker completed the circle, the footsteps stopped, just ceased. No walking away, no fading out into the distance, just stopped. As if the walker had vanished into the air, Daniel and his partner stood in that position for an hour, muscles cramping, until the sun began to crest over the horizon, painting the desert in shades of red and gold. When the relief shift came, Daniel's partner requested a transfer. He never stood guard at that post again. So, what are we dealing with here? A skeptic and the Department of Defense will tell you these are classic cases of pareidolia and hypnagogic hallucinations. Pareidolia is the brain's tendency to find patterns where none exist. We evolved to spot predators in the grass, so when we are tired and stressed, a shadow becomes a man. A bush becomes a monster. Hypnagogia happens when the brain is transitioning between wakefulness and sleep. It can cause vivid, terrifying hallucinations, and let's be honest, sleep deprivation is standard issue in the military. These men and women were exhausted, their brains were swimming in cortisol and adrenaline. It is perfectly logical to say they were just tired, but there is a problem with the hallucination theory. Hallucinations are personal. They are internal glitches in one person's mind. Why did Daniel and his partner hear the same footsteps at the same time? Why do soldiers from different units, different years, and different bases report seeing the exact same figures? The watcher in the tree line, the grieving woman in black. When we speak to the locals, interpreters, and villagers who live near these outposts, they aren't surprised by these stories. In fact, they warned us. In the local belief system, this land is not empty. It is inhabited by the jinn. In Islamic theology and pre-Islamic Arabian folklore, the jinn are not fairy tales. They are considered a reality. They are beings created from smokeless fire. They occupy a parallel world that overlaps with ours. They have their own societies, their own wars, and their own territories. The legends say that jinn are attracted to ruins, to desolate places, and to blood. Iraq has seen more blood than almost any land on earth. Every shovel you put into that ground risks hitting a grave from a war fought 2,000 years ago. Is it possible that in our modern arrogance, we marched our armies into places that were not empty? That we set up our bases and checkpoints in the living rooms of something ancient? Some locals believe that certain areas of the desert are claimed. They are forbidden zones. When you walk there, you are trespassing, and the owners of that land, they watch. We will likely never know what Marcus saw in that field. We will never know who or what walked past Daniel in the dark. But we do know this: war changes the people who fight it, and perhaps it changes the world around them too. These soldiers brought home medals, scars, and memories of combat, but some of them brought home questions that will never be answered. They carry the weight of the silence. If you are listening to this and you have served, if you have stood on a wall in the middle of the night and felt the hair on your neck stand up, you know what we are talking about. You are not crazy. You are not alone, and you are welcome here. This is Trench Shadows. We are digging for the truth, one story at a time. Stay in the light. You are not crazy. You are not alone, and you are welcome here. This channel, Trench Shadows, is building an archive of these unexplained events. We are here to document what the official reports leave out, but we cannot do it without you. If you have a story, whether you are a veteran who served overseas, or a civilian who strayed too close to the edge of the unknown, we want to hear it. Share your experience in the comments below, or contact us directly through the email in the description. Your identity will be protected, but your story deserves to be told. And if you want to be here when we open the next file, if you want to see what else is hiding in the dark, make sure you are subscribed and have your notifications active. We have many more accounts to share, and trust me, you do not want to be left alone when the next story drops. Thank you for watching. Keep your eyes open.